The mansion stood tall on the hill, a place of shining glass windows and marble floors. From the outside, people often thought the Anderson family lived a perfect life. Mr. Anderson was a millionaire businessman, known across the city for his success. He owned companies, signed big deals, and appeared in newspapers with a confident smile. But behind the tall walls of his mansion, his life carried a quiet sadness that money could not solve. Inside those walls lived his twins, Emma and Ethan, just 8 years old, who had been blind since birth. Emma and Ethan were not like other children. While most kids their age ran around playing, drawing, and reading storybooks, these twins lived in a world of darkness. They depended on touch and sound to understand what was happening around them. Their father tried to give them everything money could buy: expensive doctors, famous specialists, special teachers, and the newest equipment. Yet, nothing seemed to change. The doctors always said the same words: the twins would never see. Every time Mr. Anderson heard those words, he felt a heavy stone in his heart. He loved his children dearly, but he buried himself in work, maybe because work was easier than facing his pain at home. Most of the time, the twins were left in the care of nannies and house staff. But the truth was, many of these workers treated the children as if they were burdens. The mansion was full of coldness when it came to the twins. The nannies gave them food, made sure they were dressed, but rarely showed warmth or patience. Emma and Ethan longed for laughter, for someone to talk to them kindly, for someone who would not just serve them but love them. They often sat together, holding hands, whispering to each other about dreams they couldn't fully see but could feel inside their hearts. Emma sometimes asked, "Ethan, what do you think the sky looks like?" And Ethan would answer with a smile, "Maybe it feels like the soft breeze on our face, or the warmth when the sun touches us." They built their world through imagination. But deep down, both wished for more, wished for a miracle. One morning, as sunlight touched the grand hall, a new face entered the mansion. Her name was Grace. She was a middle-aged black woman with gentle eyes and a kind smile. She came quietly, carrying her small bag, ready to begin her new job as the maid. For her, this was just another house where she would clean, cook, and follow orders. She had no idea her life was about to change, and neither did the family. Grace's first impression of the mansion was one of silence. The air felt heavy, as though joy had no place there. She was shown around by the head housekeeper, who quickly pointed at rooms and gave strict instructions. "The twins' room is there," the woman said in a flat tone. "You don't need to bother much with them. Just make sure they don't get into trouble." Grace nodded politely, but her heart was curious. She had worked in many homes before, and she knew when something felt off. That afternoon, while she was dusting the library shelves, she heard soft voices and giggles from the corner of the hall. Following the sound, she saw them, the twins. Emma and Ethan were sitting on the floor with small blocks in their hands, trying to build a tower by touch. The blocks kept falling, and they laughed softly, whispering encouragement to each other. Grace watched for a moment, then walked closer. "Hello there," she said warmly. The twins turned their faces toward her voice. Emma tilted her head and asked, "Who are you?" Grace knelt beside them and smiled. "My name is Grace. I'll be working here from now on." Ethan reached out his hand, and Grace gently held it. "Your hands feel warm," he said. Emma followed, placing her small hand in Grace's other palm. "You sound kind," she whispered. Grace felt her heart melt. These children, blind yet so aware, were craving kindness. She sat with them for a while, describing how the blocks looked, how tall the tower could be if they stacked them carefully. The twins listened with excitement. For the first time in a long time, someone wasn't just ordering them around but truly talking to them. From that day, Grace made it a habit to spend time with them. She told them stories while working, describing the garden outside, the colors of the flowers, and even how the clouds looked in the morning sky. The twins were fascinated. They began to ask her endless questions. "What does red look like?" Emma asked one day. Grace thought for a moment and answered gently, "Red feels like the warmth of fire, or the way your cheeks feel when you are happy." Ethan asked, "What about blue?" Grace smiled. "Blue is the calmness of water, like when you put your feet in a cool stream." The children listened with shining faces, even though they couldn't see. Grace gave them a gift no one else had offered, the gift of imagination with love. But Grace also noticed something unusual. One evening, while Emma turned toward the window, Grace saw her eyes flicker faintly at the light coming through the curtains. It was so small, almost unnoticeable. Later, when Ethan followed a shadow with his head, Grace's heart skipped a beat. She had seen enough in her life to know when something was not ordinary. Could it be that their blindness was not complete? Could it be that there was still hope? She thought about telling Mr. Anderson, but she hesitated. Would he listen to her? She was just a maid, after all. Doctors had already declared their judgment, and he trusted them more than anyone. Still, Grace could not ignore what she saw. That night, as she tucked the twins into bed, she whispered, "You are stronger than you know. Maybe one day, you'll see more than you think." Emma smiled sleepily and asked, "Do you believe that?" Grace squeezed her hand and said, "Yes, with all my heart." While the rest of the staff treated the twins as chores, Grace treated them as her own. She noticed their laughter, their struggles, their courage. The mansion, once a cold place, began to carry a new energy. Emma and Ethan looked forward to every moment with Grace. And though she had only just arrived, the twins already felt she was more than a maid, she was a light in their world of darkness. But Grace had no idea that her kindness was planting the seeds of something extraordinary, something that would one day surprise not only the children but the entire household. And Mr. Anderson, who lived surrounded by wealth yet blinded by sorrow, was about to discover that miracles sometimes come from the people we least expect. Days turned into weeks, and the presence of Grace in the mansion slowly began to change the rhythm of life inside those walls. Every morning, when the sun rose and painted the sky in colors the twins could not see, Grace would walk into their room with a cheerful tone. She never entered silently the way the nannies once did. Instead, she always greeted them with a smile in her voice. "Good morning, my little sunshines," she would say, and the twins would giggle, feeling that she was bringing the morning with her. Grace took care of them differently. Instead of simply placing food in front of them, she guided them to touch it, smell it, and understand what they were eating. "This is a strawberry," she would say, pressing the soft fruit into their hands. "It is red and shaped like a little heart. It tastes sweet but sometimes a little sour. Try it." The twins would taste and laugh, enjoying her playful explanations. To them, food became an adventure instead of just another meal. She also described the world outside. The children often asked her questions, and Grace had the patience to answer in ways they could understand. "How tall is a tree?" Ethan asked one afternoon as they sat in the garden. Grace placed his small hand against the trunk and guided it upward until he could no longer reach. "That's how tall it is," she said, smiling. "Imagine it stretching higher than even your father's big house." Emma leaned forward and asked, "And what does the garden look like?" Grace closed her eyes and painted it with words. "The roses are red like the warmth of fire, the lilies are white like the softness of snow, and the butterflies move as gently as whispers in the air." The twins listened with awe. For the first time, they felt connected to the world beyond their blindness. They could not see, but through Grace's words, they learned to imagine. But Grace's heart could not forget the small flickers she had noticed in their eyes. She began watching carefully. When she opened the curtains, she saw how Emma turned slightly toward the brightness. When a candle burned in the dining room, Ethan sometimes tilted his head as if sensing its glow. These were not accidents. Grace felt sure of it now the twins were not fully blind. One evening, after putting the children to bed, she quietly approached Mr. Anderson in his study. He was sitting behind his large desk, going through files, his face tired from long hours of work. "Sir," Grace began respectfully, "may I speak with you about Emma and Ethan?" He looked up, adjusting his glasses. "Yes, what is it?" His tone was polite but distracted, as though his mind was still buried in business matters. Grace took a deep breath. "I have been noticing something. The twins, they react to light. It is faint, but it is there. I believe they might still have some vision, and with the right care, it could be improved." Mr. Anderson's face hardened. He leaned back in his chair and shook his head slowly. "Grace, I've taken my children to the best doctors in the country. They all said the same thing: nothing can be done. I appreciate your concern, but please don't give them false hope." Grace's eyes softened, but her voice remained steady. "I understand, sir. But sometimes, even the best doctors miss what love and patience can see. I am not asking you to believe me right now. Just watch them closely. You will notice it too." Mr. Anderson gave a faint smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "You have a kind heart, Grace, but don't let your kindness turn into dreams that cannot be fulfilled." He returned to his papers, ending the conversation. Grace left quietly, but she did not give up. If the father would not believe her yet, she would keep nurturing the children herself. The next morning, she started a little game. She held a candle and placed it in front of Emma, then asked softly, "Do you feel anything when I move this?" Emma tilted her head, then pointed shyly. "It feels like something is brighter there." Grace's heart leaped with joy. She clapped her hands gently and hugged Emma. "Yes, my dear, that is the light." Ethan tried as well, and though his response was slower, he too seemed to follow the flicker. Grace turned these small exercises into daily routines. She did not tell the children they would see one day. She did not want to promise what she could not control, but she filled them with encouragement. "You are stronger than you think," she whispered often. "Every day, you can discover more." The children responded with laughter and energy. They grew eager to spend time with her, waiting for her stories and little exercises. Slowly, their confidence grew. Emma began walking with a surer step, and Ethan tried to explore the house more than before. The rest of the staff, however, noticed the changes with skepticism. One of the nannies muttered to another, "Grace is wasting her time. The children are blind. What does she think she's doing?" Another added, "She's just making them believe something impossible." They mocked her softly, but Grace ignored them. She knew what she saw, and she believed in the children even if no one else did. One evening, as Mr. Anderson came home earlier than usual, he walked past the playroom and stopped. He saw Grace holding a lantern while the twins sat on the carpet. "Where is the light, Emma?" Grace asked. Emma hesitated for a moment, then raised her hand toward the lantern's glow. Mr. Anderson froze. He rubbed his eyes, thinking it was his imagination. Then Ethan followed the shadow when Grace moved the lantern across the wall. The sight stunned him. For years he had accepted that his children were lost in darkness. Now, before his own eyes, they were responding to light. His heart pounded as he stepped inside. "Ethan." "Emma, how did you do that?" he asked with a trembling voice. The twins turned toward his voice, smiling proudly. "Grace taught us," Ethan said. "She says maybe we can learn more." Mr. Anderson looked at Grace, his eyes wide with disbelief. For a moment, he did not know whether to feel joy or anger. "Why didn't you tell me again?" he asked sharply. Grace bowed her head but answered calmly. "I did, sir. You did not believe me. But I did not want to give up on them. I only wanted to help." Silence filled the room. Mr. Anderson's heart softened as he looked at his children, their faces glowing with hope he hadn't seen in years. Finally, he whispered, "Perhaps I was too blind myself." That night, he could not sleep. He kept thinking about what he had witnessed. The next morning, he made calls to specialists, searching for someone new, someone who might give a different answer. Deep down, for the first time in years, he felt a spark of hope that his twins might one day see the world they had only dreamed about. And though the road ahead was still uncertain, the change had begun, all because of Grace, the woman who saw what no one else cared to notice. The atmosphere in the Anderson mansion slowly began to shift. What was once a house filled with silence and formality now carried the sound of laughter, clapping, and playful chatter. For the first time in years, Mr. Anderson found himself coming home and pausing at the door, listening to his children's voices as they played with Grace. Those soft giggles and joyful calls were things he thought he would never hear again. Grace's exercises with the twins had become a part of their daily routine. She would light candles, open windows to let the sunshine in, and even use shadows to play games with them. Sometimes she would place her hand in front of the lamp and ask, "Ethan, what shape do you feel the light is making now?" Ethan, concentrating, would tilt his head and smile. "It feels like something is blocking half of it," he would guess, and Grace would cheer, "Yes, it's my hand." "You're right." Emma, not to be left behind, would laugh and add, "Let me try next." What made the difference was not just the activities but the way Grace believed in every small step. She celebrated the smallest progress as if it were the greatest victory. When Ethan first managed to notice a flicker of brightness across the room, Grace clapped her hands like a child herself, filling the room with joy. When Emma turned her head toward the sunlight without hesitation, Grace hugged her tightly and whispered, "You are doing it, my little star." But not everyone in the house accepted these changes easily. The other staff members still doubted her methods. "They are blind," one of the cooks whispered to another. "Grace is only making them believe nonsense. The poor children will be heartbroken later." Another staff member shook her head. "She is stubborn, I'll give her that. But miracles don't happen just because you want them to." Grace ignored their gossip. She had seen enough to know that something inside the twins was awakening, and she refused to let doubt take away their progress. Still, their comments sometimes weighed on her. Late at night, after putting the children to bed, she would sit in her small room, fold her hands, and whisper to herself, "Please let me be right. Please don't let me give them hope for nothing." Meanwhile, Mr. Anderson began to watch more closely. Though he had spent years buried in his work, he now found himself sitting quietly in the corner of the room, observing Grace and the children. He watched as Emma reached toward a glowing candle or as Ethan pointed toward the direction of movement. Each time, his heart grew heavy with a mixture of guilt and wonder. Why had he never noticed this before? Why had he trusted the cold words of doctors over the soft whispers of love? One evening, as Grace was about to begin another exercise, Mr. Anderson entered the playroom. His presence was unusual, and the twins immediately turned toward him with smiles. "Daddy," they cried together. He knelt on the floor with them, something he had not done in years. Grace handed him a lantern and asked softly, "Would you like to try with them, sir?" For a moment, Mr. Anderson hesitated. He was a man used to boardrooms, contracts, and figures, not little games with lights. But then he saw the expectant faces of his children, and his heart melted. He held the lantern and moved it slowly across the room. To his astonishment, Ethan's head turned, following the light's path. "There," Ethan said proudly, pointing toward the glow. Emma clapped and added, "I see it too, Daddy." Mr. Anderson's hands shook as he lowered the lantern. He felt a lump in his throat, and his eyes grew wet. He pulled both children into his arms, holding them tightly. For the first time in a long time, he allowed his emotions to surface. He whispered, I am so proud of you. Both of you. The twins smiled, feeling warmth they had long missed from their father. Grace, standing quietly in the background, wiped away a tear, knowing that this was just the beginning. Not long after, Mr. Anderson arranged for a new medical consultation. He found a specialist who was known for treating complex vision cases. The appointment was set, and Grace accompanied the family to the clinic. The children were nervous but excited. For them, this was not just another doctor. They believed this could be the day someone finally confirmed what they were experiencing. The specialist examined them carefully, using different lights, lenses, and tools. He spent a long time checking their eyes, while Mr. Anderson waited anxiously. At last, the doctor leaned back and smiled gently. "Your children are not completely blind," he said. "Their condition is rare, but there is still partial function in their eyes. With consistent therapy, training, and care, there is a chance their vision can improve over time." The words felt like a miracle. Mr. Anderson let out a deep breath he had been holding for years. He glanced at Grace, his eyes filled with gratitude. She had been right all along. Grace lowered her head humbly, but inside her heart danced with joy. Emma and Ethan clapped their hands, not fully understanding the medical terms but sensing the hope in everyone's voices. When they returned to the mansion, the atmosphere had completely changed. Mr. Anderson called the staff together and, for the first time in years, spoke with a tone filled with happiness. "My children have hope," he declared. "And we owe much of this discovery to Grace." The staff, who once doubted her, stood quietly, some embarrassed by their earlier words. Grace remained humble, saying only, "I just did what love told me to do." From then on, the exercises became a serious part of the children's daily life. Mr. Anderson himself began joining in whenever he could. Instead of locking himself in his office, he spent evenings with his children, guiding them through simple activities. He began to learn patience, something business had never taught him. Grace continued her role, encouraging the twins with her endless love. Every small improvement was celebrated. When Emma first described the difference between light and shadow, everyone clapped. When Ethan recognized the outline of a chair, tears filled Mr. Anderson's eyes. Each step felt like a victory, proof that hope could grow even in the darkest places. The children, once quiet and withdrawn, now laughed freely, their joy filling the halls of the mansion. Grace had not only helped their eyes but also opened their hearts. She gave them the courage to believe in themselves. And slowly, even Mr. Anderson, once blinded by despair, began to see what truly mattered in life. The next chapter in the Anderson family's life was not an easy one. The specialist had given them hope, but hope came with a long road ahead. The treatment plan for Emma and Ethan required therapy sessions, new medical equipment, and regular visits to the clinic. There were exercises for the eyes, tests of light and shadow, and tasks that required endless patience. For children who had grown up in darkness, it was both exciting and exhausting. The first few weeks were especially difficult. Some days, the children felt discouraged. Emma cried when she could not distinguish between two objects during a session. Ethan grew frustrated when his eyes watered and hurt from the bright lights used in therapy. They were only 8 years old, and the weight of the challenge sometimes felt too heavy for their small shoulders. But Grace was always there. When Emma cried, Grace knelt beside her, wiping her tears gently. "My dear, even the strongest trees grow slowly. Do you know how long it takes a seed to become a tree? Many years. But it grows every single day, even when you cannot see it. You are like that tree." Emma sniffled, leaned into her arms, and whispered, "Will I really be able to see?" Grace smiled softly. "Yes, little star. Step by step, we will reach there." With Ethan, Grace used encouragement through play. When he grew restless, she turned therapy into games. "Let's pretend the light is a firefly," she would say. "Can you catch where it goes?" Ethan would laugh and forget his frustration, trying again with renewed energy. Grace's creativity made even the hardest exercises feel less like medical tasks and more like adventures. Mr. Anderson watched all of this with deep admiration. He had always thought money was the only way to solve problems: hire the best doctors, buy the best machines, spend whatever it took. But watching Grace, he realized love and patience were things money could never replace. He began to spend more time with the twins, joining Grace in their daily routines. In the evenings, he would sit with them in the garden, holding their hands as Grace described the sunset. He discovered that the children did not just need a father who provided, they needed a father who was present. Slowly, the children started showing progress. Emma began to notice faint colors. "Grace," she said one morning, her eyes wide with wonder, "I think I can see something, it looks like gold." Grace laughed and clapped. "That is the sunlight, shining through the window." Ethan, too, began to identify shapes. At first, he could only tell when something large moved in front of him, but over time, he started to point out objects. "That's the chair, right?" he asked proudly one afternoon. Grace hugged him tightly. "Yes, my brave boy, that's the chair." Every little success filled the mansion with joy. Even the staff, who once doubted Grace, now began to smile when they saw the children's progress. The cook would sometimes peek into the playroom and whisper to another maid, "Did you see? Emma noticed the flowers today." The head housekeeper, who had once dismissed the children, started leaving small treats for them in the kitchen, quietly showing her support. Still, the journey was not without setbacks. There were days when the children felt their progress had stopped. Sometimes Emma grew tired and said, "Maybe I will never see fully. Maybe this is as far as I'll go." Grace would gently hold her hands and reply, "Do not think about how far you have left to go. Think about how far you've already come. A month ago, you could not see the sunlight. Now you can. That is a miracle already." Ethan sometimes grew impatient, saying, "Why is it taking so long?" Mr. Anderson would place his hand on his son's shoulder and say, "Because the best things in life are worth waiting for. And you, my boy, are worth everything." For Mr. Anderson, this experience was changing him as much as it was changing his children. He no longer spent his evenings buried in paperwork. Instead, he would rush home, eager to join Grace and the twins. He began to notice small details he had once ignored: the sound of his children's laughter, the joy of hearing them call him daddy with excitement, the way their faces lit up even when they made tiny improvements. For years, he had let his wealth separate him from his family. Now, he understood that true wealth was right in front of him. One rainy evening, while the therapy session had ended, the family sat together in the living room. The windows were streaked with raindrops, and the soft sound of thunder echoed outside. Grace lit a candle, and the twins sat close to her. She moved her hand in front of the candle, casting a shadow. "Can you see this?" she asked gently. Emma squinted, then nodded. "I think I can, it looks darker there." Ethan leaned forward and whispered, "It looks like something is blocking it." Mr. Anderson's heart swelled. He reached out, pulling his children close to him. His voice cracked as he said, "You are both my greatest gift." For the first time in years, tears streamed down his face, not of sorrow but of gratitude. Grace, sitting nearby, smiled quietly, her heart full. She knew this family was healing together, not just through sight but through love. As the weeks turned into months, the mansion was no longer the same place. Once cold and silent, it now felt warm and alive. The twins laughed freely, Grace filled the rooms with her gentle songs and encouragement, and Mr. Anderson's footsteps no longer echoed with loneliness but with purpose. Even visitors noticed the change. Business partners who came to see Mr. Anderson were surprised to see him smiling more, his face softer, his energy brighter. "You look different," one colleague remarked. Mr. Anderson simply replied, "My children are teaching me how to see again." Though the road was still long, and the twins' vision was not yet perfect, the direction was clear. Their lives were moving toward light, step by step. Grace had become more than just a maid, she was the heart of the family. The twins often whispered to her at night, "You are our angel." And in truth, she was. But none of them knew that the biggest moment was yet to come, the day when the children would finally open their eyes to the world in a way they never had before. That day would change not only their lives but also everyone who had ever doubted miracles. The seasons changed, and with them, the Anderson family's life continued to blossom. Every day, Emma and Ethan practiced their exercises with Grace by their side. They were no longer the same children who once sat in quiet sadness, depending only on sound and touch. They now moved with excitement, spoke with confidence, and carried hope in their hearts. The once dark world was slowly filling with light, shapes, and even faint colors. Mr. Anderson noticed how much they had grown. He saw Emma smile when she held a flower close and whispered, "It's red, isn't it?" He watched Ethan point proudly to the dining table and say, "That is where Daddy sits." Each small victory felt like a miracle. Sometimes, Mr. Anderson would walk into his office late at night and stare at old photographs of the twins as babies. He remembered the day he first heard the word blind. He had felt his world collapse that day. But now, years later, he was witnessing something no doctor had promised him, a miracle born out of love, patience, and determination. The mansion was alive with joy, but Grace never stopped pushing gently for more progress. She believed the twins could go further than anyone imagined. One morning, she decided to take them outside the mansion gates for the first time. With Mr. Anderson's permission, she held their hands and led them to the park nearby. The fresh air filled their lungs, and the sound of children laughing around them brought wide smiles to their faces. Grace guided Emma's hand to touch a swing and Ethan's hand to feel the rough bark of a tree. "Can you feel it?" she asked. "This is the world waiting for you." The twins laughed and said together, "One day, we will see it all." Their progress reached a point where the specialist suggested a new, more advanced therapy session that could greatly improve their sight. It was not guaranteed, and it would require effort and courage, but the family agreed to try. The night before the session, Emma whispered to her brother, "What if it doesn't work?" Ethan held her hand and replied, "Then we still have Grace. And Daddy. And each other. That's already enough." Grace overheard their words and felt tears in her eyes. The twins, once hopeless, had learned the true meaning of strength. The next morning, they entered the clinic. The lights were brighter than usual, and the room was filled with quiet tension. Mr. Anderson sat nervously, his hands trembling as he waited. Grace stayed close to the twins, encouraging them with her steady voice. The doctor began the exercises, slowly increasing the intensity of light and testing their responses. At first, Emma squinted and shook her head. "It's too bright," she whispered. Ethan blinked repeatedly, frustrated. But Grace held their hands firmly and said, "Take it one step at a time. Don't be afraid. The light is your friend." Minutes turned into an hour, and something extraordinary began to happen. Emma opened her eyes wider, and for the first time, her lips trembled as she gasped. I I see something. It's not dark. It's colors." The doctor leaned forward, his voice filled with excitement. "Yes, focus. Tell me what you see." Emma's face lit up. "It looks like gold. It's shining. Daddy, is that you?" She pointed shakily toward where her father sat. Mr. Anderson froze. Tears filled his eyes as he stood up, unable to believe what he was hearing. "Yes, sweetheart. It's me. I'm here." Emma's eyes, though still weak, managed to follow his figure. She let out a cry of joy and reached her arms toward him. Mr. Anderson rushed forward, pulling her close as tears streamed down his face. "You did it, my little star. You did it." At that moment, Ethan shouted, "Me too. I see something. It's moving. Grace, is that you?" Grace's heart raced as she stepped forward. "Yes, my brave boy. It's me." Ethan laughed loudly, tears rolling down his cheeks. "I can see you. You're shining." Grace knelt down, hugging him tightly as he buried his face into her shoulder, whispering, "Thank you. Thank you for not giving up." The entire room was filled with emotions, tears, laughter, and a sense of awe. Even the doctor, who had seen many cases, shook his head in disbelief. "This is beyond what I expected," he admitted. "Their vision may still need years of support, but this is a miracle." When they returned home that evening, the mansion felt brighter than ever before. The twins walked through the halls, pointing to shapes and objects they could now faintly recognize. "That's the window," Emma cried. "And that's the big painting," Ethan added proudly. Every discovery was celebrated with clapping and laughter. The staff gathered around, some with tears in their eyes, apologizing silently through their smiles for ever doubting Grace. Mr. Anderson gathered everyone in the living room. Standing proudly with his children by his side, he spoke with a trembling but firm voice. "For years, I thought money could solve everything. I gave my children doctors, equipment, and care that only wealth could buy. But none of it gave them what they truly needed. It was Grace who gave them love, faith, and patience. She gave them hope when even I had lost it. Today, my children see the world not just because of therapy but because of her heart." The twins, still clinging to Grace, shouted together, "She is our angel." The room filled with applause, and Grace, overwhelmed with emotion, lowered her head humbly. "I only did what any mother would do," she said softly. Mr. Anderson stepped forward, lifting her chin with kindness in his eyes. "No, Grace. You did more. You gave my children a life they were told they would never have. For that, you will always be family." From that day on, Grace was no longer just a maid. She became a permanent part of the Anderson household, not as a servant but as someone who was loved and respected. She continued to guide the twins, teaching them how to embrace their new world, how to read, how to explore, and how to live with courage. Mr. Anderson, too, changed completely. He became a father who no longer hid behind work but chose to spend his time watching his children grow, walking with them in the garden, and listening to their laughter. Emma and Ethan's story spread quietly beyond the mansion. Neighbors and friends who once pitied the family now spoke of them with admiration. The Millionaire's twins were blind, they said, but love gave them sight. People often looked at Grace with respect, whispering that she was the true miracle worker. The twins themselves grew into strong, confident children. Their world was still not perfect, sometimes their eyes struggled, sometimes the colors were faint, but they no longer lived in darkness. They had learned that life was not just about what you could see with your eyes but also about what you could feel with your heart. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, the family sat together on the porch. Emma leaned against her father and whispered, "The sky, it's so beautiful." Ethan, sitting on Grace's lap, added, "It's even more beautiful because we can see it together." Mr. Anderson placed his arms around them both and whispered, "Yes, my darlings. This is the greatest gift I have ever received." Grace, smiling with quiet pride, looked at them and thought to herself that sometimes, miracles do not come from money or power but from love, faith, and the courage to never give up. And so, the story of the Anderson family became one of transformation, proof that even in the deepest darkness, a small spark of love can light the way.